right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight. Yeah, sorry, it's pretty loud, right? He's quieter talker than I am. I don't really need the microphone. In fact, I have to hold myself back on the microphone. So thank you all for coming out tonight. My name is Caroline Fry. I'm the Advocacy and Media Manager with Colorado Common Cause. This is our first Thursday of the month, happy hour. We do these every month. Kind of an excuse to come together, meet fellow members, enjoy a beverage, and learn about an interesting topic. So tonight, I'm really, really happy that Aldridge Shimama will be our speaker. Aldridge has been with us since August 10th, I want to say, something like that, give or take. 11th, yes, you remember. So he's our Community Solutions Program Fellow. He'll be with us until December, and he specifically works on corruption in his hometown of Zambia. He applied for a very prestigious scholarship to be able to come and do this program. And we felt that because of our work doing government accountability and transparency in Colorado, it was just a natural fit. He's a fantastic community organizer. I've already learned a lot from him. When I asked him earlier today what his favorite and least favorite things were about the United States, least favorite is guns, which definitely has been a very pertinent issue this week especially. Favorite thing, that Americans are so hospitable and welcoming, which I was really happy to hear that we've done a good job of welcoming him. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Aldridge. I'm going to mic you up. Second mic is for Facebook Live.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to see all of you here. And I want to thank you all for spending this time that you've come to come and listen to me. My name is Aldridge Chibomba. I'll put it up on the screen.
I can hear. Nope.
Yeah. In case I didn't pronounce it properly, that's my name. So I come from a small country in Africa called Zambia. Jeff has been there, but I'm sure most of you... okay. So if you look at the map, that's where I come from, where I've put a circle there. If you get closer, Southern Africa, where the star is, that's Zambia. So we have about 8 neighboring countries. I'm sure you've heard of Zimbabwe and Namibia. That's where I came from. So, maybe the first question everyone wants to ask is, how did you find yourself in the US from that small country to Denver? It's a long story, but I'll cut it short. I'll say when I was growing up, I had a vision or a dream to visit the US. But I didn't know how or what would bring me here. As I reached my 20s, I think that vision disappeared until last year, September, when one of my supervisors sent me a link to a program called the Community Solutions Fellowship. So this is a fellowship sponsored by the U.S. Department of State, and it's run by a non-profit institution called IREX, International Research and Exchanges Board. So when I saw that link, I felt this is my chance. Maybe I have something that can take me to the US. So I didn't believe in myself, but I decided to make the attempt. Lucky enough, out of 2,600 applicants, I was picked and taken to the semi-final stage where we were about 400. From 400, the application continued. We had to write some things and attend interviews online, and that narrowed down to 100. Fortunately, I'm one of the 100. So that's me with my colleague from Zambia. So there's two of us from Zambia in the US. He's in Maryland and I'm here. So that's me with him. The day they took us around the city to see the capital. So that's how I found myself. Yeah. So before I go into what I do back home, maybe a little bit about myself. Don't mind the slides. I think there are too many or too few, depends, but I think I would love to speak without looking at that. So I'm a second born in a family of three. My elder sister studied finance, accountancy, I'm not sure, but she works for an insurance company. And my young brother is a political scientist, graduated from the University of Zambia. And I'm a graduate from that same university with a degree in mass communication. Unfortunately, I've never worked in a media house. My first job was with a government agency that fights corruption called the Anti-Corruption Commission, or in the American way you would say anti-corruption, but that's hard for me to say. So I'll be saying anti-corruption. That's the British way, I guess. So I joined the Anti-Corruption Commission. So I joined the Anti-Corruption Commission in 2012 as a community education officer. So my job basically is to meet people, talk to them about corruption, tell them how to report, what to do if someone comes with a bribe, how do you do that, how do you fight that, or you're seeing someone breaking the law, and then let's say it's a police officer. Instead of arresting people, he gets bribes and then let the criminals go away. What do you do if you observe that? So basically that's what I do, getting in touch with the community. And the institution is well known for conducting investigations. So when someone says, I come from the Anti-Corruption Commission, everyone walks away. They don't want to. Yeah, it's more like saying FBI. I mean, no one wants to be near you. So my job is to make it seem soft, to show people that this institution has a human face and we are humans with love and would want to work with you to fight corruption. So feel free to report and help us. So that's my role. That's one of the things I was doing. We were educating voters during the 2016 elections. That was another workshop we were doing with people in the rural areas. So we do have exhibitions during public holidays or trade fairs, like the one that was here a month ago.
Yeah.
Yes. What was it?
People's Fair.
People's Fair, yeah. So when we have such things, we go there with our tents and materials and we give out information. Those that want to report and feel lazy to walk up to our offices, so we decide to go and meet the people where they're found. So that's in a village. I was with my colleagues 2 years ago. We were sensitizing. So that's one of the tables that we have and the materials. So these materials, we produce them ourselves as an institution. So everything that's there has been produced by my colleagues and myself. And sometimes we use people from the Ministry of Education just to make sure that the curriculum incorporates things that have to do with corruption in the fight. So every year, December 9th, we commemorate the International Anti-Corruption Day. I'm not sure if this is done in the US, but so if you are party to the UN Convention Against Corruption, then you should be commemorating this. I'm sure the US must have signed that somewhere. So in my spare time, what do? I don't just fight corruption. At church, I'm a member of a singing group, so I do sing. In case you want me to sing for you, I'll do that.
Absolutely. Maybe you can do a duet with Caroline.
So I'm interested in music, so sometimes when I have free time, I get on a computer and type a few notes in this electronic software, and the music comes out. But of course, I'm able to play drums and I think a little bit of the piano. So I'm also interested in programming, and right now I'm into C#. Those that do programming, I think you would understand what that is. So I'm a member of the treasury at church, and we are trying to come up with a software that would make our work easy. So I'm into that, and I'm trying to go into Java programming right now. So if there's anyone who does programming here, please, I'd love to see you after this. So that was a bit about me. Maybe now let me talk briefly about my country before I go into what we do in the fight against corruption. So Zambia, if you compare it to the US, I would say it's the size of Texas and maybe part of Louisiana, if you get that. So that's why I tried to place it there. So it's a very small, I would say it's 1/50th of the US. So we have a democratic system with 3 arms of government: the executive, legislature, and the judiciary. So the head of the executive is a president who has a vice and members of cabinet. Then we have 164 members of parliament. So 156 of these are elected by people. We have 156 constituencies. So each member comes from a particular constituency. But then the constitution gives the president powers to nominate 8 more to make it 164. Then we have the judiciary headed by the Chief Justice. And the courts that we have 4 levels. The first one, we have a Supreme Court, which is the highest, and we have what is called the Constitutional Court. So those 2 are on the same level, but for Constitutional Court, it only handles matters to do with the Constitution. Let's say my human rights have been violated. I can't go to the Supreme Court, I'll go to the Constitution Court. But for things like appeals coming from the lower courts, they go to the Supreme Court. Then we have a High Court. We have Magistrate Court. I'm not sure if this exists in the US. It's not there. Then we have what they call local courts. So these just handle petty issues, nothing criminal, just civil. Maybe someone called the other person a witch, they feel offended, so they would go to the local court and, yeah. Of course, you can still go to the higher courts for defamation of character, but it always starts at a lower level. So we have elections every 5 years. So in the past, whoever gets the highest number of votes would become president. But in 2015, they changed the constitution and said, for you to be president, you should get 50% of the votes and an additional. I think the idea was, of course, possibility of having two people with 50% each is there, but it's minimal. So for the president, you get 50% plus. That's when you become president. So the president and the vice are elected together. In the past, you don't elect the president, and then he gets to choose the vice, and he can fire and hire. So it was changed, and then they said, this time you have to elect both the vice and the president. This came about because we've lost two presidents in office. And every time the president died, we had to have presidential elections. Even 6 months before a general election, if the president died, we would have to vote, and 6 months later, again vote. So in trying to preserve resources, they said this time the vice president is elected with the president. If the president dies or is out of office for any reason, the vice takes over and finishes that term. Then for the rest, members of parliament, the mayors, those are elected, whoever gets the highest gets a seat. But then all these seats run for 5 years. And we vote on the same day. So if you enter a polling station, you'll be given about 5 ballot papers. One has the president, member of parliament for your area, the mayor for your town, the councillors for your town. Then you vote, and you have about 6 or 5 ballot boxes, and you have to place each ballot in the corresponding box. So the country is still young. We got independence in 1964 from Britain. So our first president was Kenneth Kaunda. I will not talk about all of them, but from 1964 we've had 6 presidents. I was looking at the US, I think from 1964 you've had about 8, right? Yeah. So the first president was in power for about 27 years. The reason is, when he became president, 8 years later, he changed the constitution to make sure that there was only one political party which was allowed under the constitution, and that was his. So that's quite strange. We were not there, but we heard about it. And then in 1991, the IMF forced him to change the constitution to a multi-party, and that's how he lost. And from that time, we've had only 2 parties in power. The first one, that took over from 1991, we've had 3 presidents from that party. The next one, we've had 2. So the one at the far end is the one in power right now until 2021. So Zambia is divided into 10 provinces. If you bring it to the US, maybe you'd say districts. Then these are divided into further smaller chunks for administrative purposes. So we have our own currency. We don't use the US dollar like our neighbors in the south, Zimbabwe. So the main activities, we depend mostly on copper, but we have quite a number of minerals, but copper is the main export. We also depend on agriculture, but much of this is subsistent. There are few commercial farmers around, so. Then we also have tourism. I was speaking to someone who's been to the Victoria Falls, so that's one of the things that we do to generate funds. Then we have a population of about 15.9 million. The capital city has 2.1 million. It may not be as big as Denver, but there's a lot of people in that place. I would say it's congested. For me, that's what I would say. And then the population, about 41.8, is in the urban areas, and the rest are in villages. In terms of literacy, we are at 63.4% of the population, and 70.9 of that 63.4 are men, the rest are women. So we have more men educated than women, but the government is trying to equal the playing field. So much of our population is made of young people. I'm impressed. From the time I came, I've met a lot of old people here, and they seem so strong. Yeah. In my country, more than half of the population are young people. I would say below 40. We don't know what's happening, but that's how it is. And the life expectancy has been put at around, I think, 52 years. So most people die by the time they get to 60. In terms of religion, the majority are Christians, with the Protestant taking the bigger chunk, and the Catholic Church as well. Then we have Muslims and Hindus, but those, they make up less than 2%. Then in terms of languages and tribes, we have 73 tribes. So that means each tribe has its own language. But then out of those 73, seven languages are the ones that are spoken, and the others are kind of dialects of the 7. So the people that belong to the remaining 66 are able to understand one of the 7. So the biggest one, that red one, is Bemba. More people speak that language. So for me, I'm coming from the blue area. That's my tribe and language. But where I live right now is the western part. So I'm able to speak my language and that language in that area, and that red one I'm able to understand, and English. So I speak about 4 languages. So English is the official language, and from preschool to university, instruction is done in English. But at the moment, they're trying to preserve the local languages, so kids are taught in the local language until when they're about 10 years old. That's when they switch to English. So these are a few pictures about Zambia. So these are some kind of traditional ceremonies that people do. This is my capital city. It's not as advanced as Denver, but we still have some buildings. We also have Intercontinental Hotel. So this is the Victoria Falls for people that have been there. If you want to do bungee jumping, go to my country. So this is the subsistence agriculture I was talking about. People still use cattle-drawn plows since we don't have horses. So the majority of people still do this. But right now it's so bad because we don't have rains and there's hunger everywhere. So that's the road going to my town. Sometimes you find lions on the road, and I've never seen this, but the first lion I saw actually was at Denver Zoo, unfortunately.
Is the first lion yet?
Yes. I used to see them on National Geographic, but I'd never seen one live. So it's an iron that we have so many lions, and then I see the first one in Denver. So we have white people that come. If you want to be shown the African way, please come to Zambia and they will show you. So she's cooking that's the main meal that we call it shima, where you get corn flour and kind of cook it into some porridge, but make it a bit harder. And then you make balls and dip it into gravy or fish or anything. I would say it's more like a tortilla. I think it has a similar taste. So now let me talk about the work that I do. So I work for the Anti-Corruption Commission. So this institution has three main functions. The first is to investigate and prosecute. Then we have corruption prevention and community education. So I come from the third. That's the department where I come from. So the idea was, when they first established it in 1980, it was purely for investigations. But then they discovered if someone gets a bribe of $50 in, let me say, border, for you to go and ask people around, you need fuel, and maybe the distance is long enough that you can't come back, so you need money for lodging. And then you need lawyers and take someone to court. By the time you finish, you would have spent $20,000 to chase a bribe of $100. So they thought, let's come up with corruption prevention to stop this before it happens and prevent us from losing funds. But then that was not enough. They discovered these things kept on going. Maybe people were ignorant and they didn't realize what they were doing, so they thought, let's add community education. So that's how that department came about. But 75% of the staff are still doing investigations. Then the other 25% is split between corruption prevention and community education. So the definition of corruption, I've decided to use pictures. So we have three definitions in our law which we follow. The first is where you give a bribe in exchange for favor. We also have abuse of government resources for personal or for the gain of someone else. Even if I don't benefit, but if I go against the procedure and use my powers to make someone else benefit, I'm still guilty. Then there's a funny one which has come on about, they say if you own property that is more than your emoluments, past and present, you'll be taken to court and you have to explain how you got that. So in most crimes, the burden of proof lies on the state, but in this one, it lies on you. So you have to prove how you bought that jet or that car. So how do we do that? We will check your records from the time you were old enough to make money, whether it's 1980 up to now. We check everything. Did you get a loan? Did you win a lottery? Maybe you have a donation from your grandfather who was a billionaire and he left you this property. We check that nothing counts, but then you have all this money. We'll take you to court. So you have to explain where the money came from. If you don't, everything you own will be forfeited to the state. But then I have to mention this only applies to people that work in government. If you're doing business, you run your own things, you're free to do and make money in your own way. But if I work for government the way I do, they don't expect to see me with maybe a very big house or a private jet. I will need to explain where it came from. So if I go back with that, I'll have to show them who gave it to me when I was in Denver. So corruption in Zambia shows itself in three main ways: petty corruption, grand corruption, and political. All three are very, very easy to see. They are there. I'll explain a bit further. So for petty corruption, mostly this is done by people at a point of service delivery, like the police. Mostly these will mount roadblocks unnecessarily. And even if your car has everything, they will make sure they find something to talk about. Maybe they'll look at, are you wearing a seatbelt, or are your tires okay? They'll just find something, and then they'll tell you to pay. I will use dollars for the sake of your understanding. Maybe the charge is $50, and you know you were not ready for that. What happens? You reach an agreement where you give him maybe 20, but then that 20 goes in his pocket and not to the state. So it's a kind of a win-win situation where you pay less and then he also makes money that is not supposed to have, but he has it anyway. So we also have a department called the Road Traffic and Safety Agency. So these are the ones that issue driving licenses. So they have some funny ways of testing people. And the way they do it, it's rare that you would pass on your first attempt. I had to do it twice for me to get the license. Some people do it even 4 times. But then they have so much power. If you just talk to him, he's able to get your details and put them in the system, and the document will come out within 2 hours, even without you going on the road for a test. So these are they're vulnerable, and we've received a lot of complaints about these people. We also have medical personnel. I actually encountered this. I took a friend to the clinic, and there was a long queue, maybe from here to the road outside. But then this nurse comes and says, he pulled me by the side and says, if you give me something, I can take you to the doctor directly. You don't need to wait for this line. But then I had to tell him where I work, and I was supposed to take him to the office for an arrest, but I decided to forgive him, and I educated him instead. So this is common. You find people, maybe, let me just explain. The first step when you go to a clinic in Zambia, you reach a point where they take your temperature, your weight, maybe just record a few vitals about you. That's when you be told now to go to another room where your file is kept. So there's no computer where you just punch in and say outreach and it shows you the file is on deck 4. No. There's this pile of files and the person will have to literally go in and search for your file, which may take another 30 minutes. And then from there, that's when you join the queue now going to see a doctor. But then this guy tells me if I pay him, everything will be done within 5 minutes. They'll find my file and I'll just go and see the doctor and, do it before all these people that are found at the clinic. So this is common and most people do that. They just pay. Even when I was joining the institution, we were under pressure. You had to take your medical records within the same day. But then you have to make an appointment with a doctor for him to check, do a medical examination on you. So where do you get the report from? Then you have these guys wearing white coats and they are passing around and they say, if you give me something, the report will come out within 10 minutes. So it's very easy for me to give him that. He gives me the report and I rush back to the institution and get employed. So we don't have a system of the medical insurance that you have here, but ours is quite porous to corruption. And then people that do recruitments, these are highly vulnerable to corruption. Jobs are hard to come by in Zambia, so you find for one position you have 200 applicants. So the one who gives them the bigger amount gets the job. But then most of them you find 10 people paid the same guy, but only one person got the job. So now that the bribe has backfired, that's when someone will come and report to the Anti-Corruption Commission. But if they get the job, they don't come and you will never hear that someone paid a bribe. So we also have the people that collect tax. Maybe here I would say the Internal Revenue Service. So these, usually they find people that do not comply with the rules. So instead of reporting them to the institution for penalties, they'll just make a deal and forge a few documents to show that someone is complying, and then they get paid for that. So we receive a lot of complaints about this. Maybe the other question is, so that's my department, that's the headquarters. So someone may ask, you talk about corruption in other institutions, but do you have petty corruption in your institution? I would say yes. We are human beings as well. We are not machines or robots, so we're still vulnerable to these things. But I would say my institution is quite principled, and I haven't really had any case where someone has picked a bribe. Of course, anyway, there's no need for you to get a bribe. Maybe the only bribe you would get is where someone you're investigating or about to arrest gives you money and tells you to destroy the docket. But then the system is hard. You can't just destroy information without repercussions. Then we have grand corruption. So mostly this happens at high levels where contracts are done. So that example, those are land cruisers that were bought to be used as ambulances. So you find at a go the government buys 500 vehicles. And then you have 5 dealers that supply the same amount of vehicle, maybe the same price, but then how do you award the contract to one? So we hear cases where someone will visit the minister at night and offer something. If you follow up, you find that the one who was in charge of that process received 2 of those vehicles for himself from the supplier because he gave them the contract and left the other bidders out. road construction is heavily funded in Zambia, and because of that, everyone wants to rush into construction, and we have so many companies. But then how do they award contracts? Right now, there's controversy over some fire tenders that they bought. They bought 42 of them at $1 million each. But then if you look at those machines, I think if I put it in this room, from here, I don't think it would reach the wall on the other side. They are very small. You know, those that don't have a bowser behind with water. It's more like a fire engine where you need to plug it into the, I don't know what do you call those?
Fire hydrant?
Yes. But then one was going for $1 million, one. But then people are showing that there are all kinds of pictures of machines that cost $1 million that are bigger than what they bought. And right now someone is saying the supplier of those machines bought 3 SUVs for the minister in charge of that department. Of course, he has denied, but there seems to be solid evidence to that. So that is one of the cases. Maybe before I talk about political corruption, I would say another area is the procurement of drugs. You know, Africa is ravaged by HIV. So Zambia has a policy where anyone who's found positive is put on medication, which is free of charge. The government subsidizes. And actually part of the payment comes from the US government. Maybe you didn't know. The US government actually funds, together with the Zambian government, the project where they buy drugs for people that are living with HIV. So we have situations where someone is a secretary in a department that procures. I think about 8 years ago we had a situation where one of the people bought expired drugs at a very cheap cost, but then they inflated the price and pocketed the remaining. Maybe to bring it into real terms, I would say out of $50 million, the drugs were going for 30 million, but then they still quoted 50 million in the invoice. So the extra 20 was shared between the supplier of the drugs and that person who was in charge. And the case is still going on, but right now I would say everything that they own is under the custody of the Anti-Corruption Commission until the case is disposed of. So that's one area in which these people do that. Then we have political corruption. So mostly this happens when we are about to go into elections. So people will come with money and then they will give you money so that you give them the documents that are needed for you to vote. When you register as a voter in Zambia, you're given a document called a voter's card. So someone will come and give you money to surrender that card to them. Then when the day of voting comes, you don't vote. So maybe the question is, why do they do that? So the idea is this: if you know that Colorado is for the Democrats and you're a Republican, you go and get all the cards of everyone you think is going to vote for the Democrats. So in other words, this is used to disenfranchise voters of another candidate that you feel if they were to go and vote, they would definitely not vote for you. So this takes away the votes for that candidate, but then you keep your voters, you make sure your voters have their cards and they go and vote for you. Then the other one is where people bring food. I will say food. That's what they usually give. Money, no, but food. Because of the hunger, mostly in rural areas, someone will go with bags and bags of food. The idea is to influence you to vote for them. So this happens every time we have elections. We have tried as an institution, but seems like, I don't know, we don't know what we are doing, and this seems to be getting worse and worse every election year. And I would say there's also non-compliance to the electoral code, especially by those in power. And we always receive complaints from people that say, this party did this, but then we cannot do anything because of the people above us. So the country is different from the US. Here you have a system, and the system controls the president. But in Africa, you may have a system, but the president controls the system. Unfortunately, that's how it is. So maybe the reasons why corruption is so rampant, information or ignorance. Most people that we arrest, they always confess that they didn't know that what they were doing was wrong. We have laws that stipulate, I'll give an example. If I go for work and someone gives me a gift, I'm not supposed to take it. Sorry. The law says I'm not supposed to be paid by a private person for work that I'm paid at the end of the month by the government. But then you find people go for work and they come back with plenty of gifts. Or you're doing a recruitment, but then you don't declare interest to say, this woman that's about to come in is my cousin, so I can't be part of the panel. People just go on and interview and give the job to their sons or friends. But then when we arrest them and tell them, you read this part of the law, it says, if you are connected to anyone in any way, you're supposed to declare interest. People say they don't know anything. But then the question is, don't we have enough books that talk about this? We do. Africans don't read. Actually, there's a saying that if you want to hide something from an African, put it in a book. So that's true. Most of us don't read in Zambia. We only know about something when you're at the police station and you're about to be thrown in jail. That's when you realize this thing exists in the law. The procedures are cumbersome, unnecessarily long, and sometimes they're not clear. If I go to get a license, I don't really know which office I'm supposed to go to first, or how much I'm supposed to pay for that. So you find someone, this is my passport. For you to get this, you just need to pay $30. I've converted to dollars from my currency. $30. But then when you go to that office where they give this, you will not know what to do. You don't know who to see, how much to pay. But then you have all these guys walking around and they come and tell you, if you pay me something, this thing will come out within 1 week. That is supposed to come out after 4 weeks from the time I apply. But then you have people that have collected them 2 days from the time the application was done. So the question is it possible to have that passport within 2 days? Yes. But then why is the procedure done in such a way that you have to wait for 30 days for you to collect it? So that creates a gap and makes people vulnerable. Imagine if I didn't have a passport and then IREX tells me you've been selected to go to the US and I have 3 weeks to prepare. What do I do? Probably I was going to be forced to go and bribe someone so that I get that. Fortunately, I had it before. But then that happens to most of us in my country. You find that you need something, but then the time frame does not allow you to get that. So you bribe someone and you get it within a day. and yet the procedure says you get it after 2 months. So those processes are things that bring about corruption. And then I would say our leaders just don't have morals or ethics. Right now, politics in Zambia is seen as a way of getting rich. Because if I become a member of parliament or a president, then I have access to the Chinese. Right now, there are so many Chinese there. They're doing all sorts of contracts. So I have access to those people and I have access to resources. I can do anything I want. So everyone is jumping into politics. I hope I will not be one of them, but that's how it happens. Almost everyone is leaving the public service and becoming politicians. But then the idea is to get rich quickly. So this issue of saying people should do the right thing when they're in power is not there in Zambia. As long as you're in power, you can do any wrong thing and you'll not go anywhere. Of course, a time for you to account will come when you are no longer in power, but that may take 20 years and there will be no more evidence for people to take you to jail. And resources, so that scale is trying to show that the resources are few and the population is more. You find every year the country has about maybe 20,000 people that graduate from high school and need to go to college. But then the main institution that everyone wants to go to, the highest public institution, can only accept 4,000. What do? So that creates a gap. Even among the 4,000 that are picked, you find the institution only has rooms for 300 people. So for you to get a room on campus, you really need to pay someone, or else, I don't know, you have to find a boarding house somewhere where you pay more than your tuition maybe. So that creates a gap and makes people to rush into corruption just to have the resources that they can't have if the playing field was level. Then I would say cultural practices. There's some tribes in Zambia have this culture that they have a saying. Let me try to translate it. And they say, whoever works in the field benefits from the field. If you work in a bar, you benefit whatever happens there. So in short, what it means, if you work in a bar, of course you benefit from the wages that are paid to you. But then what it goes beyond, it means if you work in a bar, you can have free beer and you can bring 4 of your friends and then just give them free beer, then they don't pay for that. So in short, there's a tendency that when you're in power, then your entire family should get connected and they get all the jobs. And right now, if you go in all the embassies that Zambia has in different countries, including the one in the US in Washington, D.C., you find people that come from just one region of the country. They speak one language, they belong to one tribe. To that. Why? Because when someone became president, he decided to fire everyone in the diplomatic corps and employs his own. After 10 years, when he's out, the next guy comes. So there's nothing like career diplomat in my country where you go and study international relations and then you're posted to the US embassy somewhere or in France. No. Right now, if I know someone in government, when I go back, I may come back as an ambassador in the US. So that's how the system works. So there's so much nepotism and people think you've worked so much, you've used your money to campaign. So when you get to the top, it's now your turn to reap and benefit from the effort that you paid. So This, I'm sure, is very different from what you have here. So the effects, there are so many. Poverty is going from bad to worse, and there's so much inequality right now, where you have someone who had nothing within 3 months of being in power, they have everything. But then if you follow the money, you find maybe they were supposed to build a school that could enable children to get an education, but you find there's no school in that area. So we have to chase these guys and arrest them, but then the damage has already been done, and the levels of inequality are getting worse every day. So most of the things that they do, like roads right now, or even the fire tenders I'm talking about, if you give me a call a year from now and ask me in what condition those will be, I'll be honest with you, I don't think any of them will be running. There was a project where they went and bought vehicles to be using for transporting, I think, dead people. That was the main idea. When they bought those machines, the first complaint was that the machines were overpriced. So in short, the government connived with the supplier and told him to hike the price, and then they would share the excess. 6 months down the line, none of those vehicles were running. They were all packed, and no one could buy the spare parts. They were bought, I think, from China or India, and from a company that no one knows. So that's an example. Even the roads that we have, someone was just telling me one of the roads, I think when we were going to Steamboat Springs, they were telling me this road has been here for the past 10 years. I was shocked because in my country, a tarmac road doesn't last more than 5 years. Every 5 years you have to get a contract and redo the work. But then does it mean that you can't make a road that can last more than 10 years? You can. But then people decide to give their friends the contracts, and they end up doing things that are not supposed to be done. Mediocre service delivery. That is one of the streets in the capital city. Right now, even if you go there right now, you still find that. So because of corruption, people are they give contracts to some guys to be collecting garbage, but then you find the guy has been paid, he doesn't collect garbage. When you follow him up, he'll just point at the president. Because they're connected, then you can't do anything about it. But then the city continues becoming dirty like that every time. People have been given contracts to supply food to primary schools where kids are fed. There's a feeding program where they give them some food every morning. But then someone gets a contract to supply food, is paid but doesn't supply anything. So we have a lot of ghost suppliers there. But then you can't do anything because they're connected. Due to corruption as well, at some point Zambia had some instability. Actually, on the US, the embassy website in Lusaka, they had notified all Americans to be cautious when they go to Zambia, because people were fighting and the police can't do anything. Why? They've been corrupted or they've been bought by these guys, and as long as you belong to the ruling party, you can go and do anything. And those are people carrying pangas, I don't know what you call them here, machetes. Yes. That is in the street, and they're demonstrating. If you say anything, they'll beat you up. But then where do you go? You go to court, you go to the police, nothing happens to them. Why? Because of corruption. I'm sure you've heard of African countries that have become ungovernable. I'll give an example of Somalia. Of course, maybe the main reason was not corruption, but at some point, if we continue that way, we may end up in the path of Somalia. So that is one example also where law enforcement becomes hard. The law in Zambia says you cannot use those are dump trucks, the ones they use in the mines, to transport people. But then these are guys from the ruling party that get on those trucks and they can move and block traffic in any way they want. No one will say anything because the system is kind of corrupt. Another effect, due to corruption, we end up electing people that don't qualify to be there. Right now it's about who has popularity and not about who has the best policies. So if I have enough money and I have some guys and I'm known in a place and they say, oh, we grew up with him and we know him, they bring up some musicians and they go around making gigs and campaigning for me, then I win and I bribe people to vote for me. I'm in power. But then what do I bring on the table? Nothing. I have no policies that can please everyone. Then finally, the other effect, as an institution, the Anti-Corruption Commission, we have suffered so much. People have lost trust in us. I was trying to look for newspaper clippings that would show, but I was having a hard time, so I just found one. So people have this perception that the Anti-Corruption Commission is used by the people in power to fix their opponents, that's one. And two, we are moribund, useless, and we don't do anything. Even when people report to us, we just let these things go. There could be some truth to that. Remember when I was showing you the departments that are corrupt, I kept on saying we receive complaints from these. But if you ask me how many police officers have we taken to court or how many nurses have we arrested, probably this year, none. Why? Because of maybe some procedures in the institution. So that makes it difficult for us to fight. But then the question is there anything that can be done to stop corruption in Zambia? Yes. In 2008-9, the government adopted what they call the National Anti-Corruption Policy. So this policy was brought about after they did some baseline studies and came up with 3 levels in which they would want to fight corruption. So the first level is legal. So this gives the Anti-Corruption Commission a mandate or powers to devise laws and then take them to Parliament for enactment. So one of them, right now we have what we call the Forfeiture of Proceeds of Crime Act. In the past, if I want, I could steal 10 billion, go to jail for 5 years, come out and enjoy my money. But now we have a law, if you steal and you're convicted, anything that is connected to your crime, computers, vehicles, anything, will go to the state. When you come out of jail, you have nothing. We also have what we call the Whistleblowers Protection Act. So that was enacted because of the Anti-Corruption Commission. Anyone who reports a crime now is protected by law, as long as there's no malicious reporting involved. Then we have the institutional level. Under the institutional level, the Anti-Corruption Commission runs what we call integrity committees. So these are committees that we have placed in different institutions. Right now it's law that all government departments should have integrity committees. So these come up with codes of conduct or ethics. They come up with service charters. In short, it answers that question of when I go to an office, where do I start from? So these committees come up with a structure to say, when you come here, if you want to renew your trading license, this is the office where you go, you pay $10 and you wait for 7 days for your license to come out. If it doesn't come out, you can sue that department. And the last level is the social level. This is where they felt people think fighting corruption is just for the Anti-Corruption Commission. So they decided to say, let's involve everyone. So that's where community education comes in. to bring about everyone on board, the community, non-profit organizations, and government departments. So what do I hope to learn from here? I chose Common Cause because I felt the work they do, like in voting and elections and upholding ethics, is quite similar to what I do. It may not be the same, but at least there's something that I can learn from there. And so far from the time I've been around, I've met people at Common Cause and other partner organizations within Denver. Right now, what I've been impressed is the use of digital technologies such as the internet, Facebook, emails, podcasts, to spread the word. That is what we don't do, especially my institution doesn't do that. They believe in talking to people the way I'm talking to you, but then the question is, how many meetings am I going to do to reach out to 1,000 people? But online, I can reach out to everyone. So that's one of the things that I've learned, and I hope to learn more. The idea is when I go back, I have to do a 6 months project to demonstrate what I've learned from here. So I thank you all, and I've met a number of you here. We've had good conversations, and I hope to meet more of you and learn more. So in any way that you feel you can help me to do my work better of community education, please, you're welcome, and I'm free to meet anyone. This is where I'll end. Thank you so much.
Maybe unpin you. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Aldrich? Okay, hold on. You're not off the hook yet.
So does your current president support or any corruption department?
It's quite hard to say, but from the way things have been happening, my conclusion is that he doesn't like the agency.
Is your job dangerous?
Hello?
Is your job dangerous?
Yes. It's quite dangerous, and you can't really come out in the open and say the president said this or that or did that, because there are people everywhere who report to him, and I would say they have some kind of a secret service, and you may never know. Even people that I work with, some of them belong to that party, so if I was to say something, they would report and say, hey, there's someone who's saying things. And so in Zambia, it's very easy to get fired. Once the president hears that there's someone talking down there, it's just one phone call to your boss, and that's the end.
Why do you feel so strongly about corruption?
Why do I feel so strongly about corruption? Maybe I would say the way my father brought me up. I used to wonder why he never got rich when most of his friends did. I'll give an example. When he was building a house, people would come with bags of cement. If a bag goes for $10, this guy is selling one at $2. But my father would never buy that. So I never used to understand why, and would go and complain and say, I wanted the laptop, but my father can't buy it. My friend has a laptop. But then you discover that your friend's dad didn't buy it in the right way. But then when I grew up, I understood, so that kind of had an impact on me. Most of my friends have what they have because they paid someone. But for me, I didn't. I was lucky that I was quite bright in school, so I used to, like if there's a privilege, I would get it because maybe I would come out first, top in class, so that would come to me. Even when I got this job, I never paid anyone. It just happened maybe the way I talked in the interview. I impressed people and they felt they could give it to me. But most of the people, they have to pay someone to get the job. So I would say my upbringing kind of makes me passionate about it.